Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today for our live chat. We're going to give everyone just a few more minutes to get logged in. And in the meantime, I'll go ahead and introduce myself. My name is Lakelyn Hogan. I'm gerontologist and caregiver advocate with Home Instead Senior Care. And again, I want to thank you so much for tuning in today for our first live chat of 2019. We're going to be talking about healthy habits for family caregivers. Our live chats are brought to you by Home Instead Senior Care, a network of locally owned franchise offices. The Home Instead Senior Care Network offers in-home care with an individualized approach to help keep your loved ones safe and independent at home. And to learn more, you can visit homeinstead.com. Before we get started with our chat, I want to go over a few housekeeping items. First and foremost, we have muted all of your lines. That's to reduce background noise, and we want you to be able to still move about the house. So if you're cooking lunch and listening to us, or if the doorbell rings, no worries, we can't hear you on our end. But we are taking your questions, and we do want to hear from you. And so you can submit your questions at any time in the questions box. So at the bottom of your screen, you'll see a box that says Q&A. And that's where you can type in your questions. You know, there's no such thing as a silly question. The great thing about this live chat community is that we learn and gain knowledge and information from everyone's questions. So again, feel free to submit those at any time throughout our chat, and we'll do our best to get to all of those questions. And we're also recording this webinar. So you will receive a link to the recording after today's webinar. We send that out via email, so you can go back and listen to the chat or send it along to a family member, friend, coworker who you might think would benefit from today's topic. So look for that email coming within 24 hours. And then we always post the recording on our website, helpforalzheimersfamilies.com. So if you want to go back and listen to it on the site, you can, or look back at all of our past chats that we did in 2018. We had some great speakers. So I think that covers our housekeeping items for today. So I'll go ahead and introduce our topic and our speaker. First of all, again, if you just tuned in, I want to thank you for joining us. Happy New Year. This is the first chat of 2019 in our Alzheimer's Live Chat series. And I don't know about you, but at the start of every year, I take time to do a little reflection, look back at the previous year. So I looked back at 2018, and I'm thinking ahead to the coming year. Sometimes I set an intention or choose one word that I want to try to influence my coming year, or I set goals for myself, or even a resolution or two. And a lot of times these goals and resolutions are centered around health and nutrition, sleep, stress reduction, goals personally, professionally. And when we think about these types of goals and intentions for the year, a lot of times, again, they center around healthy habits. And so that really is our topic for today. But we know as family caregivers, sometimes taking time for ourselves to create healthy habits seems next to impossible because we're already stretched thin, we're limited in our time and our resources. But we're going to talk today about how little things, little healthy habits can be integrated into your everyday caregiving routine that can really go a long way in helping you maintain your health and well-being so you can continue to provide the much needed care to your loved one with Alzheimer's or another type of dementia. So we're going to be talking about, exercise, diet, how to keep your brain healthy, how to overcome some of the challenges of caregiving. We have a great expert with us today who's going to talk about all of this and also tell us about a 30-day brain health challenge that we can all take part in, again, to introduce those quick, healthy little habits into our everyday routines. So our guest expert today is Brooks Kenny. Brooks serves as Executive Director of Women Against Alzheimer's and is charged with directing its growth strategy through strategic partnerships and marketing initiatives. Brooks is a nationally recognized subject matter expert in caregiving and is often called upon to speak with groups on such topics as cause marketing and strategic partnerships. Brooks has served in a leadership capacity for various nonprofit governing organizations and oversees committees and has authored white papers, articles, and training documents for nonprofit leaders. Brooks also has personal caregiving experience, as she has cared for her mother-in-law who lost her battle to Alzheimer's disease a few years ago. So we're excited to have Brooks here with us to talk about her personal and professional experience in this space. So hi, Brooks, welcome. Thank you so much for being with us.
Hi, Lakelyn. Thank you so much for having me. On behalf of everyone at Women Against Alzheimer's, we're thrilled to be joining you and the participants today.
Oh, well, the honor is all ours. We're a great partner of Women Against Alzheimer's on the corporate level, and also Us Against Alzheimer's, which is kind of your parent organization. So we're excited to be able to partner with you in this way to bring this great information to our family caregiver audience. And as I mentioned, we're going to be talking about healthy habits for caregivers. And one area of health that doesn't really get talked about enough, in my opinion, is brain health. Caregivers provide much needed care to their loved ones, and often I get questions from caregivers asking about, am I at risk for Alzheimer's or dementia? What are some things I can do to make sure that I don't get it? And so the conversation always circles back to kind of that brain health. So we also hear that caregivers sometimes lack time for self-care, but we're learning that there are a number of things that caregivers can do to reduce their risk. And so I was going to open it up to you now to talk to us about how your organization, Women Against Alzheimer's, has really approached this issue as a whole. So would you mind sharing with us, Brooks?
Sure. No, I would be happy to. Thank you again for having me. And our story around brain health, I think, really starts with a little bit of background about Women Against Alzheimer's. Since our founding, the Women's Network of Us Against Alzheimer's has really been focused on changing the conversation around Alzheimer's disease and its impact on women. As many of you likely know, roughly 6 million Americans have been diagnosed with Alzheimer's, and more than 3.5 million of those are women. And we know that another 11 million women are family caregivers to people living with the disease. And so over the years, we've fought very hard for increased funding for research. We've fought for policies that help to alleviate the economic burden of caregiving. And we've been promoting the benefits of early detection and diagnosis of cognitive decline. And in that last area, we wanted to learn more. We wanted to understand why women weren't necessarily talking about their brain health, why diagnosis was happening so late, recognizing that it often puts a family and a community in turmoil. And so we launched research in partnership with Healthy Women, which is a national nonprofit, and we surveyed women across the country to try to understand where they were in their knowledge, their awareness, and their behaviors as it related to brain health. And what we found was really interesting. We had some assumptions. We recognize that the brain is our most vital organ. We take it everywhere we go, but it's often the organ that's left out of our regular conversations. There's a lot of talk about our heart health, our physical health, but there's not as much talk about our brain health. And so on the next slide, you'll see a summary of the research that we did. We were really surprised by the low number in that first data. 8% of women discuss brain health regularly, and 29% discuss it on occasion. Close to 70% of the women we surveyed were interested in learning more about how to measure their brain health and care for their brains. And 67% of women would ask their healthcare provider to measure their brain health or for ideas on how to maintain it if they could. And we thought this was really interesting because it is also shared by the notion that 64% of women note that the health and performance of their brain as they age worries them. So when I look at this slide, what I see is an opportunity. I see there's an opportunity here for education, for empowerment, and for people to really begin to understand what they can do to take charge of their brains. We took it one step further in the research, and we actually tried to dig into whether or not the women we surveyed were talking about brain health with their parents and whether they were focused on the steps that they could take to protect the brain health of their children. And interestingly, we still have a ways to go in both of those areas as well. So again, this really prompted us to think, what could we be doing to influence this conversation and really get people thinking about their brains as a vital organ to ultimately increase our awareness and then ultimately the opportunity for earlier detection and diagnosis, or just a recognition of something that wasn't quite right going on when we start to look at our brains in a holistic way. And what was born out of that research was a campaign. And this campaign is essentially our focus on reaching women across the country. And the theme of the campaign is to be brain powerful. And as we've probably heard, and Lakelyn, you referenced, there's more and more research that illustrates that prevention and risk reduction is an opportunity to turn hope into action when we think about Alzheimer's disease. And so Women Against Alzheimer's launched this bold new effort called Be Brain Powerful. And it really is anchored in this idea that women often are the chief medical officers for their families. They are the ones that often are raising these topics. They are the ones that are bringing information to their communities, into the workplace. And so we wanted to start with women, and we certainly want men to be part of the effort as well. But our initial campaign in our first year is focusing on empowering women to start taking control of their brain. And so we're acknowledging women that are engaging in healthy behaviors, and we're really trying to infuse hope and action into this Alzheimer's conversation, and ultimately giving women the tools that they need to control their brain health. So some of the aims of the campaign, as I mentioned, they really center around 4 themes. We want to educate, empower, engage, and elevate. So for the education, we're arming women with information they need to preserve and protect their brains, and also the brains of their families, friends, and people in their community. We are elevating women's voices. We have a growing list of global leaders who are joining our efforts and incorporating this into the conversation on brain health so that more research can occur and more policy change can be realized. Third, we're empowering women and really helping them to realize that they can be a driving force for change. If you look historically at other issues in healthcare, women coming together can really transform things. If you look at a disease like heart disease, which for so many years was thought of as a disease mostly of older men, and now women realize that the disease actually impacts them differently. Their symptoms are different, and there's an opportunity for them to take care of their hearts. And now in February, there's women wearing red dresses, and heart health is part of the normal conversation. We want brain health to reach that level as well. We want women to feel empowered to talk about their brains, acknowledge when they see changes, and take steps every single day and bring their brain along the conversation. And lastly, we are engaging with many different partners and organizations in order to enhance sex-based research, in order to gain insights about the needs of women in this brain health discussion. So one of the very first things that we did, which we're excited about with this campaign, is we launched a brain health challenge. So our campaign overall was launched in November of 2018 in New York City in partnership with Women's Day magazine and former First Lady Laura Bush. And we announced the Brain Health Challenge. And this Brain Health Challenge is a 30-day activity. When people join, they can join online by going to bebrainpowerful.org, and you sign up to be part of the Brain Health Challenge. And every single day, we send you an email with one tip for how you can stay brain healthy. And what the Brain Health Challenge is based on are the 6 pillars of brain health that the Cleveland Clinic has put forward. So there are things like eating well and having a healthy diet, staying active. We know that high intensity exercise is good for the brain. The 3rd pillar is resting and sleeping well. We all know how important sleep is. I know it's a challenge when you are caregiving, but there is increasing research that shows us the importance of resting and getting a full night's sleep. Number 4 is controlling risk, so reducing things like tobacco, use as an example. Number 5 is exercising your brain, learning new things like a language or the piano, or playing a new game that you've never played before. Those types of things are really good for exercising your brain. And lastly, but not surprisingly, connecting with friends and family and having that support. We've actually added a 7th pillar, and it's called making an impact. And we added that because we thought it was an important way for people to take action. So that action might be raising the topic with loved ones, or writing your representative about the need for more financial resources for research, or making a point to talk to your family members about changes you're seeing with mom or dad. So making an impact is kind of our action, which we are encouraging people to do on a regular basis. We've only just launched the Brain Health Challenge, but already we're getting tremendous feedback from people who are trying as best they can to take one single action every day to be thinking about their brain. And Lakelyn, what we're really excited about this is certainly we know not everybody will take an action every day for 30 days, but what we're excited about is people are thinking about their brain. People are telling us they're waking up from a decent night's sleep and saying, wow, I slept well for my brain last night, or I'm going to make this choice for my meal, and I know it's not only good for my heart, but it's good for my brain. So just acknowledging that these activities are connected to our brain health, we think is a positive step forward in our efforts. And I know you took on the Brain Health Challenge. I'd love for you to share what the experience was like for you.
Yes, I did. And thanks, Brooks, for giving us a great overview of how this Be Brain Powerful, it's a little bit of a tongue twister, came to be through your research. And, our caregiving pool, there are many female caregivers that follow us, males as well. But the great thing about this challenge is it's such an easy way to daily incorporate, brain health activities. So I do have a few photos up here on the screen of my 30-day brain challenge. It was so great. They sent an email every day, and it's what kept it top of mind, which is, of course, great. And then I was able to, read them, and then throughout my day incorporate them the best I could. So one of the challenges, or a couple of them, centered around healthy eating. And so I made a point to try to do a little more meal planning throughout those 30 days. I tried to incorporate more vegetables, healthy foods that are linked to good brain health. Ones like avocados, blueberries, those types of things. So, and I also, you guys sent me some awesome swag, or some items. And so one of your stickers, I keep it on my refrigerator. So every time I open it, hopefully it's helping me make better, healthy choices. I do have moments of weakness where I still reach for the ice cream, but on most days I'm thinking, what kind of foods can I be eating to fuel my brain? And then I do like yoga, and but sometimes it's hard to get to yoga regularly. And so this challenge, several of the days, encouraged us to just take a few moments and do a couple poses. You don't have to commit to doing yoga for a full hour, but even just 3 poses can really help to center you in the moment, remind you to breathe, get some good oxygen to your brain, and take a minute to kind of de-stress. And we even though I'm living in Nebraska, we had some unseasonably warm days recently, and so I was able to get out for a walk. And the challenge reminded us that walking is something that is easy to do. It's free. You can do it with friends, so you can get that socializing in at the same time, or walk your pet around the block. And again, just a great way to get exercise. And then one of the challenge was mind games. And I happened to be on a trip with my mom, and she taught me a new card game. And so I still have yet to win this card game, but it's really challenged my brain. And I've been playing it, and it just was fun to learn something completely new. So again, these challenges were so easy. And somebody actually typed in, is this an ongoing challenge? Jennifer is asking, how can we join? And on the last slide, towards the end of today's hour, we're going to share the website where you can go to register. But Brooks, anyone can join, is that correct?
That's correct. Anyone can join. It's an ongoing challenge. And once you've taken the 30-day challenge, we will be rolling out other challenges that we'll invite our challengers to. So we'll be looking at doing like a 7-day sleep challenge and exercise challenges for the brain and going a little bit deeper on each of the topics. But yes, it is rolling. Anyone can join by going to our website. And within the challenge emails, I did want to also mention that there are a few, as I said, that focus on actions and ideas for talking to your doctor, let's say, if you want to raise the topic of your cognition with them. And we actually have some tips and tools within the emails that you can reference. So in some cases, we may link to another resource, for example, around healthy eating. In other places, we may link to a flyer that offers tips or ideas on how to raise this topic with your healthcare provider. So certainly anyone that's listening can sign up, and we welcome your ongoing feedback if there are things that you think we could do to make the challenge stronger. But I'm thrilled to see all these photos, and it's great to hear about your experience. I love the sticker on the fridge. I'm going to have to add that to my plan.
Yeah, it's just a great daily reminder of the little things, again, that we can do, which can really, in the long run, be so impactful. I know I just was recently at a conference where they were talking about Alzheimer's disease and dementia and reducing the risk and all of these things that this 30-day challenge was calling us to do were linked to some of those risk reduction factors. So, people in the Alzheimer's community are really talking about reducing the risk and taking more preventative measures and keeping our brains healthy. And I think, as you mentioned earlier, I loved how you said that women are the chief medical officers of their household. And so it's great that this challenge really speaks well to women and empowers them to be the force of change in this area. And I also liked your analogy to the heart healthiness and how we had kind of the Go Red for Women campaign that has really built over the years. And so I think this is a great step towards that same kind of a movement for our brains, which again is so important. So thank you so much for sharing that, Brooks. And I'm excited, hopefully those of you that are listening today, at the end of today's webinar, you'll go out to the website and register for the challenge. And I think you'll really enjoy it. So any last things you wanted to add, Brooks, on the Brain Health Challenge before we kind of move into caregiver questions?
Thank you. I just wanted to emphasize one last point, and I want to just acknowledge all the caregivers listening in and how sometimes it can feel so challenging and hopeless. And we designed this campaign and the challenge to bring more hope to this topic and to this issue. So I just encourage you to think about it from that standpoint, that there are things that we now know we can do. And I hope that leaves folks feeling empowered and more hopeful.
Thank you so much, Brooks. I hope the same as well. So I think we're going to kind of segue into some questions. And again, if you are joining us, if you didn't catch at the beginning, we are taking your questions live. So at any time, feel free to type in your question in the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. We're talking about healthy habits for family caregivers. And so please type in any questions you have around family caregiving, how to keep yourself healthy as a family caregiver. We'll again be taking your questions live. So Brooks, before we get to our caregivers questions, I thought if you're willing, would you be willing to talk about your personal experience as a family caregiver and any challenges that you faced in keeping healthy habits while providing care for your mother-in-law? I think that would help give us a good kind of jumping off point for these upcoming questions.
Sure, I'm happy to. And so my mother-in-law was diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease several years ago. And as you mentioned at the top of the hour, I've really spent much of my professional life in healthcare. I actually was part of a technology company that provided support to family caregivers caring for loved ones. And so I, in that capacity, met thousands of caregivers across the country, had the opportunity to speak with caregivers on many occasions. And yet when our family was faced with this new challenge, I actually felt pretty ill-prepared. But given my background and experience, I brought as much as I could to our family to care for her. And we one of the challenges that we had was we were all caregiving from a distance, except for my father-in-law and one brother-in-law. And so we created a system whereby we would travel on a regular basis to their home in order to help them with the various tasks that come with caregiving. So keeping them safe, organizing home care, organizing meals, medication, etc. And that travel really started to take a toll on us. And I, was reflecting back when I was thinking about this talk, and I was realizing, I'm not so sure I had a lot of healthy habits during that period of time, but I do remember a couple of things that I focused on, and they may sound small to the group, but number one was because I was traveling, I was very focused on my water intake. I wanted to be sure that I was hydrated all the time because I was traveling a lot, and I was also working while caregiving. And number two, I was very focused on my time with my girlfriends. So when we were not in the throes of the caregiving, or when we had breaks in our day or in our weekend, we really tried to spend time with friends and talk about what was happening. I was not of the mind that we wanted to keep it all to ourselves. I told people the stories. I told people how hard it was. I told people how when things were going well, or when we had something special that happened with our family, like a beautiful Thanksgiving meal, I talked about it. And so I really did reach out for help, and I really did speak with my close friends and family so that I didn't have to feel alone. And I think that really helped with my overall health. Looking back, I probably could have eaten better, probably could have gotten more sleep, and certainly might have benefited from more exercise. But those were the things that I did during that period of time.
Brooks, thanks so much for sharing that. I think that, we can all learn so much from each other's experience. And so thank you for sharing, the things that you did, and offering up some suggestions of maybe areas you could have improved on. And I think that's, again, why this topic is so important, because family caregiving is a journey. And, from what I hear from most family caregivers, it's kind of a roller coaster of emotions. Sometimes they're more challenging than others. And so even with our healthy habits, we might see family caregivers doing really great for a season of their caregiving journey, and then maybe mom is hospitalized, or something happens and caregiving really or our healthy habits take a back seat to caregiving. And so I think it's great that you shared your story, and for those family caregivers who are joining us today, know that it's never too late to incorporate healthy habits, even if it's just one thing that you can do to help you take care of yourself. It's a journey. No one gets it perfect. No one does it right every single time. But, as a community, we can talk about these issues and share them with one another, and ask, how have you handled it, or what did you do to incorporate healthy habits? And again, it's an opportunity to learn from one another. So again, thank you so much for sharing your experience, Brooks.
Sure, of course. Happy to.
And again, if you're just joining us, we are taking questions live. So Brooks, if you're ready, I think we're going to tackle a few of these questions that have been coming in.
Let's do it. Great.
Okay, so Kathy writes in and asks, what are the best activities I can do to keep my own brain healthy? And I know we've talked about this a little bit, but are there any specific activities, Brooke, that we can suggest to Kathy that she could do to keep her own brain healthy?
Sure. I mean, I think it goes back to those 6 pillars of brain health as recommended by the Cleveland Clinic. And when I talk to folks, I am often met with some surprise at how important exercise and sleep are. So I wanted to emphasize those. You know, there's new research coming out around the value of regular exercise, and even short amounts of exercise every day can make an impact. And then sleep, again, you know, is underrated, not always easy to come by, but certainly important. And so even if folks are able to combine some of these, you know, even if it's sitting quietly for 5 minutes, you know, for those of you who don't want to meditate, but even just taking some deep breaths and quieting the mind before the lights are out for the evening, you know, those are ways that you can kind of combine some of the pillars and focus on resting your brain. And, you know, the new activities, I love the card game you described, and, you know, it can feel pretty overwhelming for someone to say, oh, learn something new, like a new language, or you know, a new skill like playing an instrument. Those feel pretty big, especially when you're in the midst of caregiving. But even, as you said, Lakelyn, even doing a card game, or, you know, perhaps doodling, or, you know, coloring. There's a whole movement now around adult coloring books, you know, and that's kind of a nice one too, because it combines relaxation with maybe doing something new that your brain hasn't done for a while since you were a child. So I think even just picking one that you might say, I'm going to try to do this, you know, this activity for my brain every day, and just getting in the habit of thinking about your brain, you'll be surprised at how those other habits will come forward as well.
Those are some great suggestions, Brooks. And I know when it comes to the exercise piece, for family caregivers, that can, again, seem so overwhelming. They think, I don't even have time to take a shower, let alone exercise. But there are a few, you know, I guess technology is a great tool these days. If you can't get to a gym, there are all sorts of apps that you can download. Like there's a 7-minute workout app, and I think it's put out by Johnson & Johnson perhaps. But anyway, it's just 7 minutes. You want to find something that's fun to you. I think, you know, when you're talking about exercise, if you're not doing something that you enjoy, you're less likely to do it. And I think the same goes with ways you can exercise your brain. So you want to try to find something that you enjoy. If it is coloring and being artistic, then you might be drawn to more of those types of ways to exercise the brain. Or if you're more into the numbers, perhaps there are more numbers-based games or Sudoku or something of that nature. But I think that, you know, as humans, we're always taking in information, and we all have the opportunity to learn on a daily basis if we kind of just seek out those opportunities. And in the caregiving space, there's opportunities to learn about ways to better take care of your loved one, or resources out there on learning about Alzheimer's disease and how it impacts the brain, those types of things. So when we talk about exercising the brains, it doesn't necessarily have to be in a game format. It could be just, you know, learning about a topic that interests you, and it could, in the end, help you provide better care for your loved one as well. Or in terms of the activity, you might find something that you and your loved one could do together. You know, the coloring idea, adult coloring books, I have an adult coloring book that has, you know, very complicated pictures that take a lot of kind of time and concentration. But, you know, you could do something like that with your loved one, or alongside your loved one, as they engage in an activity that they would like as well. So again, trying to help all of you family caregivers out there think about this in a way that's easy to incorporate into your already busy lives and schedules. So Jennifer, we thank you so much for that question. All right, another question that came in, and actually Robert and Sharon asked kind of the same question or similar questions. Robert said, one of the biggest challenges I face is the energy that's needed to do everything. How can I cope? And then Sharon asks, I'm getting physically tired as a caregiver to my husband. What can I do? So, Brooks, I know one of the pillars is sleep. Were there any specific tips on sleep that you came up with as you developed your brain health challenge, or when you were a family caregiver, anything in regards to sleep that you wish you would have done, or that sort of thing? We welcome your thoughts on that.
Sure. I mean, there's some pretty well agreed upon strategies for sleep. You know, one is unplugging, and not right before your head hits the pillow, but reducing that blue light, you know, well before it's bedtime. Having, to the extent it's possible, a consistent time that you go to sleep each night. And I know that that's definitely not easy when you are a full-time caregiver for a loved one, but it is recommended and something that certainly helps to create that consistency. Another strategy is to have a bedtime routine, you know, to try to teach your body what it means to be winding down. So maybe it's having a cup of tea in the evening after dinner. Maybe it's reading a chapter in a favorite book. Maybe it's taking 2 to 3 minutes and journaling and writing what you're grateful for from the day. But having that similar routine each evening can help quiet the mind and get your body prepared for sleep. We've also heard, you know, folks say having a notebook by your bed. So if you do wake up with lots of thoughts and things that you need to do or things that are overwhelming you, writing them down and getting them on paper before you try to go back to sleep can also prepare your mind and your body more for that restful sleep. In terms of overall energy, you know, certainly I am not a healthcare provider, but I would say that you know, from what we've learned in our discussions and in our research, drinking, you know, staying hydrated, drinking enough water, and eating healthy as much as we can certainly contributes to energy. But I think if there are challenges with energy, you know, talking to your own doctor is probably a good idea, so that you can be sure that you're, you know, taking a comprehensive approach.
Yeah, Brooks, I would agree with that last statement, especially, you know, as family caregivers, a lot of times, you know, when we're so busy taking our loved one to the doctor that when we go to our own doctor's appointments, well, maybe one, we're not even getting to our own doctor's appointments, but secondary, we might not be fully expressing to our doctor, you know, I am a family caregiver. These are the challenges I'm facing. I'm feeling lethargic. You know, I'm lacking energy. Those are important things to communicate, because there might be something that's happening within the caregiver's, you know, physiological makeup. Maybe there's a biological reason. Maybe they're lacking a certain vitamin, or maybe it is simply, you know, hydrating and eating better that can help fix the issue. But I think it's really important for family caregivers to express to their physician or their healthcare provider that they are a family caregiver and talk about those issues. And then one thing I did, go ahead, Michelle.
Oh, no, yeah, I was just going to say, Lakelyn, and I know I'm probably stating the obvious for your listeners, but we can't underestimate the impact that stress has on our body and then ultimately our energy. So, you know, I think a lot of these healthy habits we've talked about today can hopefully in a cumulative way support energy, but stress on that a caregiver faces, you know, over time, it can really wear you out. And so, you know, checking in on your own health, I think, is critical. And it goes back to what we said earlier about asking for help. You know, if it's hard to find time to go to the doctor, which I know it is, you know, maybe a friend or a neighbor or someone that you trust could help you out with your caregiving responsibilities in a particular time frame, so that it gives you more space and time to get your own self checked as well.
Yeah, Brooks, that's a great point. Respite care for family caregivers can be huge in terms of making sure that they have time to take care of themselves. So you're right, whether it's a family member or friend coming over, you could even hire professional care like we provide at home instead senior care, or if you're thinking, that might not be a service that I can afford, we do actually have a grant program for family caregivers who are caring for a loved one with Alzheimer's or another type of dementia. So we'll share some resources. I know that our visual isn't working right now. We apologize. So when we send out the recording, we're going to make sure we include all of the resources that we're discussing in today's live chat to make sure that you all get that information. So yes, if there's an opportunity to bring in respite or someone to help with your caregiving role, even if it's just for a couple hours once a week, to get out to that healthcare appointment or to engage in exercise or get to the grocery store or that type of thing. So that was a great point that you brought up there, Brooks. And then somebody had asked, what is the website again for signing up for the challenge? So Brooks, would you mind repeating that? Since we don't have the visual for everyone, I want to make sure that everyone gets that information.
Sure. So you can visit www. and then it's 3 words, brainpowerful.org. So bebrainpowerful.org. And you can simply scroll down and you'll see a form where we invite you to share your first name, your email, and your zip code. And then you will get a welcome email immediately. And then the following day,
And I know on that website, Brooks, you guys have a very active Instagram page. So if you follow Instagram, that's another great visual reminder. When I'm scrolling on my Instagram app, sometimes I see the Be Brain Powerful posts, and it reminds me again, another visual cue. I think, if we can have those cues in various forms, at least for me, if I see it in my email and on social media, it's again, top of mind. So I think that's great.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, please join us on Instagram. It's a fun discussion. It's one, we highlight women that are taking the challenge, and it's just at Be Brain Powerful. So similar to the website, and easy to follow. And we'd love to have any of you join. And if you're on Instagram and you take a picture and you're doing the challenge, our hashtag is brain goals. And we'd love for anybody listening to be part of that conversation online.
Awesome. And somebody just wrote in regards to the grant that I mentioned. If you visit the site, I'll type it in also in response directly to this question, but if you go to helpforalzheimersfamilies.com, the information for the grant can be found there, and the criteria for who is eligible to apply is also online there. And again, we'll make sure we send that back out. The link to the grant application, we'll send that out via email with the recording of this webinar. So thank you for that question. Okay, we have time for a couple more questions. So we have somebody who's asking, Jill, she's asking, as a caregiver, how do I deal with the isolation and loneliness? I often can't attend fun events with friends or even pick up extra shifts at work. We're in a rural area, so there's not a lot of help nearby. So I know, Brooks, that socialization is one of the pillars of being brain powerful, and just an overall positive, healthy habit to incorporate if possible as a family caregiver. So any thoughts for Jill on how she can maybe reduce the isolation and loneliness she's feeling?
Well, my heart goes out to her for sure, and I think it's isolating. It can be such an isolating experience wherever you are. But if you're limited by distance and not being able to attend events, I do think the value of technology, could come into play. So even joining some of the conversations that are happening in this space online, using FaceTime with friends. I actually, one person that took the Brain Health Challenge wrote in that she actually did a workout with a college roommate who doesn't live near her anymore. via FaceTime. So using technology maybe to connect more with folks. Maybe journaling is an opportunity to feel like you're able to kind of document how you're feeling and share that outwardly, but you know, and reflecting on your experience. But I will go back to the online piece because there are a lot of forums for caregivers. There are a lot of resources available, many of which are on the slide right now that's visible, and maybe connecting with folks in that way so that you feel like you're part of a larger community. Certainly at Us Against Alzheimer's, we have a private Facebook group with hundreds and hundreds of family caregivers who are united in their experience caring for a loved one with Alzheimer's. So trying to identify some of those resources and places for you to participate in the conversation and receive some support might be a place to start.
Brooks, thanks so much for sharing about the Us Against Alzheimer's closed Facebook group. Just in my, you know, attending your annual summit, I've learned about that group, and it sounds like such a great resource for family caregivers. And I think now hopefully you can all see our resource slide. I think we have it back up there. So I'll just kind of walk through a couple of resources that might be helpful to Jill and others who are looking to get connected to other family caregivers. If you want to visit the Us Against Alzheimer's site, you can see their website listed at the top. They have a multitude of topics on their site. They also have brain health. So if you want to learn specifically about brain health, you can go to usagainsalzheimers.org/brain-health. But on, pardon me, their website, you can get connected as well to that Facebook group. They also have other fantastic organizations within the Us Against Alzheimer's kind of umbrella. They have, you know, Clergy Against Alzheimer's, African Americans Against Alzheimer's, Latinos Against Alzheimer's. So again, that's a great site to check out and get connected in the Alzheimer's community. And then many of you had asked about, you know, if I want to join the 30-day Brain Challenge campaign, where do I go? And there's the site, bebrainpowerful.org. And then our site, helpforalzheimersfamilies.com, is where you can go to learn more about that grant application. We also have an app that you can download for free that can help you in various caregiving situations. And we also have a Facebook community too. So if you're not already connected, we encourage you to like our Facebook group, Remember for Alzheimer's. And we have a pretty interactive group there. A lot of times we put out questions that caregivers have and have you answer them, give each other some advice and support. And then Confidence to Care is a great book on helping family caregivers caring for a loved one with Alzheimer's or dementia. And then for general caregiver stress-related topics, there's caregiverstress.com. And then we talked about importance of respite care and how that can be helpful in freeing up some time for the caregiver to take care of themselves and get some much needed time away from the caregiving situation. And if you're looking for professional care, you can go to homeinstead.com. And then the Alzheimer's Association, they do have support groups. So you can visit alz.org to find out more. I know in rural communities, like Jill had mentioned, sometimes it can feel extra isolated. There might not be a support group nearby. You might not have, you know, home care providers that you can hire. But Jill, I'd also like to mention, a lot of times your place of worship or your local area office on aging, those types of organizations might have resources in terms of, you know, a volunteer from your faith community that might be willing to spend some time with your loved one while you get some time away to spend with friends, or to pick up that extra shift at work, or perhaps, you know, your local area agency on aging has a respite program that you can engage in. So those would just be a few more resources that I would add in addition to Brooke's suggestions. I think you made such a great point, Brooke, that technology, there's so many ways that we can connect with others via technology. And while we know that sometimes that also isn't always a substitute for an in-person interaction, at least there is an option for many people to get connected in that capacity. So anything else you wanted to add, Brooks, about the resources we have on the slide, or about Jill's question?
No, I don't think so. I mean, I'm familiar with all these resources that you put forward, and I think that in particular the caregiver stress and help for Alzheimer's families that you all have done, I think are just chock full of resources. So hopefully, folks will take the time to avail themselves of all this great information.
Wonderful. Okay, I think we have time for one last question. And this comes from Betty. She says, I always want to keep a positive attitude, but sometimes I just don't know how. Sometimes I say snappy things to my mother because she says snappy things to me first, and I know it's the disease talking, but my first instinct is to say something that I really don't want to say. So how can I be more positive? So I know as a family caregiver, I talked earlier about this roller coaster of emotions, and times where caregiving can definitely be more stressful. So are there any tips that you have, Brooks, for caregivers in helping to keep a positive outlook? I know we talked a lot about how this campaign is kind of a beacon of hope, that people can be empowered. It can be a positive experience. So anything in that regard that we can offer up to Betty in her situation?
Yeah, it's such a tough one, and I certainly feel for you, Betty, and certainly hope it's somewhat of a comfort to know that you're not alone, that especially for caregivers caring for loved ones with dementia, this is something that we hear a lot. And I think number one, knowing that you're not alone, hopefully that helps. I think also doing our best to try to bring humor into our day-to-day. And that might sound crass or impossible, but we've heard a lot of folks talking about ways to try to bring humor or just a lightness about it, because we know that we can't control everything, but focusing on the things that we can control, trying to not necessarily change what your loved one says, but maybe redirect them to a different topic or a different subject to be talking about, or redirecting their attention is often helpful. I mean, Lakelyn, you're probably the best one to answer this question specifically, but I know in our family situation, we did try to use humor. We tried to talk about it. We tried to tell each other when we were feeling frustrated or not our best selves, because we're all human. And so, those were the two strategies we used in our family. Was we really tried to bring humor into our day-to-day, and we tried to talk about it as much as we could so that we didn't feel alone, and so that we weren't so hard on ourselves, because it is a really hard job.
Yeah, Brooks, you kind of hit the nail on the head there. Family caregivers oftentimes really beat themselves up over kind of little things, and there are moments where we're going to get frustrated. And I think one that, Betty, you acknowledged that it's the disease talking, but we are human, as Brooks just said. Our first instinct when somebody is snappy at us, we want to be snappy back. But I think one technique that Betty, you might try practicing is, when your mother says something snappy, just pause and take a couple deep breaths. Not only is that going to be good for your brain, but it also kind of helps give you a minute to think about what you want to say next, and also kind of lower your stress level. When we take deep breaths, we know that it's helping to manage our stress internally. So I think Brooks, in addition to what you said, taking time to just take a couple deep breaths before responding, sometimes that can also help your loved one to calm down as well. If they see you kind of taking a couple deep breaths, then they too will kind of mimic that, and they'll maybe hopefully diffuse the situation. Or, as you mentioned, Brooks, redirect them to an activity, or sometimes journaling these types of interactions can be helpful too, to see, are there any patterns of when my mom is extra irritable? Is there a specific time of day? And if so, maybe you find an activity I would definitely encourage you to go to helpforalzheimersfamilies.com and download that app, that free app, because there's a lot of suggestions on there, and you can type in a keyword like agitation and tips will come up that pertain specific to those types of situations. So Betty, we thank you for writing in with that question, and thank all of you for tuning in for today's webinar and for asking great questions. Before I close this out, I did want to just mention our next live chat. We'll be talking with a husband-wife couple about living with hope. Jim and Jerry is the name of the couple, and Jerry is living with Alzheimer's disease, and her husband, Jim, is helping to support her, and she's really kind of taken an outlook of living with hope. So I hope that you will join us on February 19th at 1 p.m. Eastern Time for our next live chat. But before we close, Brooks, I want to thank you so much for joining me today, for bearing with us through some of those technical difficulties, but most of all for offering up your information, your expertise on how we can, as caregivers, incorporate healthy habits throughout our caregiving journey. So thank you so much, Brooks. It's been an absolute pleasure talking with you today.
Thank you. I really enjoyed our time together, and thank you for inviting us to be part of it.
The pleasure is all ours. Well, with that, I'm going to say goodbye to everyone that's on the call. Hope you have a great rest of your day, and I hope to have you back on our chat on February 19th. Take care, everyone. Bye.